Welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about our experience in Turkey and kind of give you our thoughts on what we liked, what we didn't like.
We are Cory and Wallace, an early retired couple on a full-time journey around the world. With a passion for exploring new cultures, discovering hidden gems, and enjoying delicious local food, we are on a mission to experience as much of the world as we can.
Yeah, we spent a little over 6 weeks in Turkey. So I feel like we had a pretty good idea of what it was all about. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what were your overall thoughts?
Overall, I ended up falling in love with it. I'll admit, at first, I think the first week when we were on the European side of Istanbul, we were both over it and wanted to leave, honestly.
So with that, let's talk about the things we didn't like. And I think for us, the obvious one would be the scams. I feel like, especially in Istanbul and especially in the touristy parts of Istanbul, everyone is out to try and take your money. And we ran into that a couple times, but do you want to talk about the first one?
I can't remember. Was it the taxi? The first one was the taxi ride. If you haven't watched our video, I'll link it up above. But basically, we ordered a taxi through B-Taxi, which is an app, which we've been doing all through Asia and stuff. It's just so that we don't have to negotiate when the taxi driver arrives. And so that we know the price, or we at least know the payment and how much it's going to charge, roughly. And so what happened was we got to the end of the ride. He immediately canceled it off the B-Taxi and then told us it was like 3 times the charge or something, and said because B-Taxi charges a commission. And we weren't having it. We had a huge argument with him and we got it down to a reasonable price, and we ended up paying a reasonable price. But first off, we ended up talking to our concierge at the hotel, and he said that was bold of him and we should have just gotten out of the taxi and walked away, because essentially if he was scamming us, there was no record by him deleting the B-Taxi, and we could have scammed him just by walking off.
Yeah, so to be clear, B-Taxi isn't like Grab in Asia where it's a fixed price for the ride. B-Taxi and Uber in Istanbul, you are still ordering a regular yellow taxi, and it is a metered ride, but the app gives you an estimate on the price range for what the meter reading should be, give or take. So when we got to that destination, it was something like 270, 280 lira for the ride at that point. And then when he canceled it, we were like, what do you mean? And he's trying to charge us 700. And then we kept saying, no, it was, whatever, like 200 and whatever it was, 280. Then he said 600, no. And we went back and forth for a couple of minutes before we finally ended up giving him 300, which, would have been fair, would have been the normal rate plus, rounding up for the tip. At any rate, yeah, so that was pretty ballsy of the guy. And so with the ride hailing apps in Turkey, there's no way to guarantee that you're still not going to get ripped off by a shady taxi driver, which is unfortunate.
From research that I did later, Uber is a little bit more likely that won't happen, but there's no guarantee. So that's just information for whoever's headed there, and hopefully this will help you to at least be aware of it and maybe help you out in a situation like that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, because once they cancel the ride on their end of the app, there's no record of it. So it's not like you can even go back, through the app, through the contact, section to file a complaint against the driver or anything, because that ride never existed technically. anyways, just something to be aware of. Next thing that we weren't huge fans of, again, this is pertaining to Istanbul particularly, is the like admission tickets for the tourist activities. Again, if you've watched our previous video, they basically tried to scam us at the Hagia Sophia by selling us the all-inclusive ticket, but very much not being upfront about what that includes or excludes, as the case may be. And so they were doing that to all the tourists, that day, and upselling the tickets. And then people are going to have a pretty rude surprise when they figure out that what they paid for isn't what they were expecting. So that kind of thing, again, just leaves a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, it wasn't completely a scam, but our credit card, we went in to buy a contact solution, and he all of a sudden pulled out a different machine. We were caught off guard and weren't really thinking, and he had us do a PIN transaction. Next day, there was a unknown charge on our card, so it could have been linked to that, but that was the only situation that had happened. And we highly recommend, if you do not use it already, Google Wallet or Apple Pay. Keep all your credit cards in there and don't do PIN transactions, just to help prevent that.
Yeah, and I can pinpoint specifically that was the retailer that my credit card got compromised, because for weeks prior to that credit card never left my wallet. So we were always using our Google Wallet and just tapping from our mobile phone to make payments. But we went into an optometry shop to buy some contact lens solution. And yeah, he pulled out a separate terminal, said you needed to insert your card and do a PIN transaction on there. So that was the only time that card got used like that. And a few days later, when I'm looking at my online banking, there was a $2,800 charge for which one was it? I can't even remember which.
Aero Mexico.
Aero Mexico, yeah, that's what it is. Aero Mexico is a $2,800 charge on Aero Mexico from that day. And so obviously I was able to pinpoint that, obviously that terminal that he used skimmed the card information, and they were able to, make a fraudulent transaction. Now, I ended up calling the bank. It got taken care of. It took 4 weeks for them to, completely clear everything up and do the investigation and reverse, that charge and all that. But in that time, of course, now I'm without one of my main credit cards, one of my main travel credit cards, because it was the one we have through Scotiabank that has no foreign exchange fees on it. And not having access to that really, really sucks when you're traveling around the world full time. Because yes, they can send a new card to your home address, but you can't get that card.
And that is where Apple Pay and Google Pay actually come in real handy, because we were able to put the information back into our phone and keep using the card as soon as we got the new card. So that's a huge benefit. But that is just a really good case. But on that note, you don't want to travel with any less than, I would say, about 5 credit cards from different banks if you're doing full-time travel, just to protect yourself from situations like this. It's not the first time our card has gotten compromised. Just
second time.
2 different countries. It can happen anywhere. It happens, but you do want to have backups.
Yeah, because I'm down 2 Visa cards at the moment. Luckily, between the 2 of us, we're carrying 10 different credit cards, so we have some options. But it does suck when it's your main ones that get compromised.
Yeah.
Anyways, next thing that we weren't such a big fan of in Turkey was the smoking.
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't done a lot in Europe as far as travel and stuff, so I don't know how the smoking compares to Europe in general. From what I understand, Europe is really bad for smoking. Asia is pretty bad for smoking as well. So, but I don't know. I'm just not a fan of going into a restaurant and having people smoke right next to you. That was done away with in Canada years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a hard transition.
And it's not that, not necessarily that they're smoking in the restaurant, but of course these patios that they do allow smoking on are open air to the restaurant. Like there's no barrier blocking that smoke from wafting in. So you're sitting there trying to eat and you're just getting cigarette smoke in your face.
Yeah.
In North America, at least in Canada, where we're from, even if the restaurant does have a smoking patio, it's in a separate outdoor area with a closed door, blocking it off. So you don't smell that smoke inside. It's just one of those things. You're trying to enjoy a meal and cigarette smoke does not help with that. So overall, not our favorite aspect of being in Turkey. It wasn't horrible, but it was noticeable on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that's enough of the negative because.
Well, one other thing, it is really expensive in the touristy areas, due to the way that their inflation worked. Anyways, when we were out doing touristy things or eating at restaurants, we really noticed the pricing. It was probably on par or more expensive than Canadian.
Yeah, Corey's not wrong there. Turkey used to have a reputation for being a very affordable, destination, affordable vacation getaway, and that does not seem to be the case. Due to pretty rampant inflation in the recent years, which has impacted their entire country. Costs for everything have risen and obviously are passed along to the consumer. So we did find overall that, especially the touristy activities, like admission prices for all the, main tourist sites were charged in euro. And also the prices for restaurants, especially around the touristy areas, were really expensive actually. Probably more expensive on average than what we would pay for an equivalent meal in Canada, which is honestly quite shocking when, we've been traveling around Southeast Asia for so long. So that was a little bit of a shock initially. And yeah.
But on the flip side of that, when we were actually cooking for ourselves, the cost of groceries are very affordable.
Yeah, our entire 3 weeks that we spent in Urgut, in an Airbnb, we were grocery shopping and cooking for ourselves for almost all that time, and we were spending probably as little on groceries per week as we've spent on this entire journey that we've been on, which that was a nice surprise.
And we were eating really healthy, like fruits, veg, everything,
like
and
fresh everything.
And the fruit was out of this world. They do a lot of growing there. They have amazing weather for that. It was like if you're from Canada, you'll understand this. It was like getting fruit and veg from the Okanagan.
Yeah, so I think their costs for that kind of thing, because they're growing so much of their produce, locally, essentially, that probably reduced some of those prices, which was nice. But yeah, restaurants, expect that it's going to cost a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
Especially now in 2025 due to inflation and whatever other else has driven up those costs.
So now that that's out of the way, now we can get to all the things that we really loved about Turkey and why we ended up falling in love. And it is potentially one of our favorite countries at this point.
Agreed. And for me, the number one thing that has to do with that is the sheer amount of history that there is to be found in Turkey. It's almost mind-blowing. Like everywhere you go, there's historical sites. Like, throw a stone, you're gonna hit a historical site. I don't know if it's true or not, but we were told that there's more ancient Greek ruins in Turkey than there are in Greece. And just looking around, yeah, I could believe that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was the first time that either of us have ever actually experienced ruins from ancient Greece or otherwise. And it was, mind-blowing because you see so many movies and stuff, and it's so cool to be walking through those paths.
It is. It's just the amount of history that you're walking through. We're from Canada. Canada's not a very old country. And here we are walking through ruins that are from like the 2nd century BC, which is just, you think about that on a time scale is really hard to comprehend fully. So that was really cool. And anywhere you go in the country, there's opportunity to see that kind of history. So that was really neat.
Yeah. The next thing that I absolutely fell in love with is the way that the government takes care of strays. Strays are taken care of by the neighborhood, by people, but the government has funding to take care of all strays. So, whether that be getting food for the animals, whether that be spay and neuter, or any vet care, because at one point I found a dog with a bunch of ticks on it, and I let somebody know, and they're like, "Yeah, we've already called the vet. We're just waiting upon them to come and get the dog so that they can take care of him." That would never happen in many countries that we've been in, including Canada. So it was very heartwarming and lovely to see.
Yeah, and it's not just the government programs, and yes, I agree, like, that the government basically funds a spay neuter program to take care of all the stray, cats and dogs on the streets is fantastic, but just the level of care you see from the locals, from the local neighborhood, when you're walking around and you see stray animals, they all look relatively healthy and well fed, and that's because most of that neighborhood has bowls of pet food, like dog, cat food out. They have bowls of water out for all the strays, and as a community, they take care of the animals in their neighborhood, and that's just wonderful to see. As an animal lover, I've never seen anything quite like that before in my life, and it's just really heartwarming, and basically is why Turkey, for me personally, is one of my top countries at this point, and almost entirely on that strength alone.
Mm-hmm.
So next thing, weather. What'd you think?
I loved the weather. Now, we hit a heat wave dead in the summer, but I think everywhere is hitting a heat wave because we're currently in Romania and we're seeing temperatures that are not normal for this time of year. So the weather, we didn't see rain. It was gorgeous. It was warm. It was very dry. But I can see how it has really good growing conditions, and the fruit and veg very much portrayed that.
Yeah, that's not wrong. One thing I'll note is if you're gonna go to Turkey in the summer, make sure you're renting a place that has air conditioning. When we were staying in Cappadocia, we chose an Airbnb because we needed a place with a kitchen. Unfortunately, when I looked for Airbnbs that had a kitchen, pretty much none of them had air conditioning, which I guess is normal in that region. It usually doesn't get that hot. So I'd reached out to the host and they were going to give us a couple of like fans for the, one for each room to keep things cool. And normally that would have been fine. But of course, with this heat wave, it was hot. It was really, really hot. So be warned, if you're going to go to Turkey in the summer, expect some heat. But other than that, yeah, like it was beautiful weather, clear blue skies most every day, temperatures well into the 30s Celsius. And I'm trying to think, I don't believe we ourselves saw any rain while we were in Turkey for those 6 weeks.
We saw a little tiny bit when we were in the Asian side of Istanbul. And when I say tiny bit, a tiny, tiny amount.
Oh yeah, see, I don't even count that because it didn't actually rain on us. But so yeah, no, the weather was fantastic.
Yeah, the next thing that I loved, I've touched on this already, the food. Once you're cooking for yourself, even if you're eating out at restaurants, the food quality is really good. Like, I think my mind was blown a couple times with how good the flavors of the fruit and veg was. For example, I was getting peaches every day and they were just absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And eating out, besides, the cost sometimes, but overall, Turkish food is delicious. I love a good pide. And you know what? If you haven't experienced a full Turkish breakfast at least once in your life, you don't know what you're missing. It is an experience that everyone should try. So yeah, overall, the food was fantastic.
And I mean, even gluten-free, I mean, it wasn't super easy, but again, it wasn't super hard. It was definitely not like the hardest country I've been to, but we did find one restaurant in particular in Cappadocia, that had mind-blowing good food. So, gluten-free, if you're willing to travel, you will be taken care of. Just use the Find Me Gluten Free app and you will find multiple restaurants that offer gluten-free and they do it well.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess, that pretty much brings us to the last point. And one of the things we really loved about Turkey overall, the atmosphere was just very relaxed, very just, peaceful in general. I really enjoyed our 6 weeks there. We were in Istanbul at the beginning and at the end. We were in Cappadocia. We went to Izmir and Ephesus. And yes, the touristy sites get busy, and Old Town in Istanbul, can get a little bit, bonkers with, lots of tourist traffic. But I never felt unsafe. Everything was always, very well organized in general, very well laid out. Getting around was easy. And just walking around the streets in any of those cities, it felt very, I guess, almost homey. Like I felt very at home there. And it was just a great atmosphere. You had, all the locals out chilling, having coffee and a cigarette, or out at the restaurants, and it was just a great environment in general.
Yeah. I would say that if you only go to the Europe side of Istanbul, your experience will not be as peaceful as ours. So I do highly recommend getting out of there, the European side. Go to the Asian side, go up to Cappadocia or Izmir or elsewhere, and you'll have a much better experience.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, we only have barely scratched the surface of Turkey. There are so many other places to see and so many other things to do. We're slow traveling, and we don't want to be going at too crazy of a pace, so we chose to focus on those areas on this trip. But overall, I loved our time there, and I think we will be back. In fact, I'm very confident in that, and I think we are going to have a lot of fun in the future exploring some of the different areas that Turkey has to offer.
Yeah, so I hope this inspires you to go and explore Turkey, because I think it's a beautiful country, and I think most people would enjoy what it has to offer.
Absolutely. So I think that's where we're going to end this video. We hope you've enjoyed this little recap of the pros and cons of our time in Turkey. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, give us a like, and make sure to subscribe.
And join us in our other videos for more adventures. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.